Oh, wow. This thing's going off. Jeez, look at it. Ronnie, this thing is spiking off the charts.
Expedition Bigfoot didn't fade away quietly. It vanished overnight. 1 week, the crew was teasing their biggest discovery yet, and the next, every episode, every clip, every post was erased like the show had never existed. Insiders now say the team wasn't finished. They were pulled out under emergency orders after capturing something so unsettling that even the network refused to air it. When a crew of survival experts, scientists, and ex-military trackers suddenly flees the woods in the middle of the night, you know something went horribly wrong. And now the real question is starting to spread. What did they find out there that was terrifying enough to shut everything down? Inside sources break their silence years later. For years, people assumed Expedition Bigfoot just ran its course, like any show that loses momentum. But the truth didn't come out until former crew members and production staff quietly started talking behind closed doors. Their stories didn't match the public excuse of bad weather or logistical delays. They painted a completely different picture, one that felt heavier, darker, and far more controlled. The show wasn't canceled. It was shut down, fast and without warning, as if someone higher up wanted everything buried before the world could ask too many questions. What first cracked the silence were leaked production memos shared anonymously with journalists and forum moderators.
I got a flash
Of eye shine.
peeking around that tree right there. It's gone.
Like, what is going on here?
It feels almost as if something is messing with us.
Yes.
These documents weren't casual notes or creative disagreements. They were urgent internal communications stamped with phrases you don't normally see in entertainment paperwork. Terms like risk to personnel, biological anomaly, and emergency extraction protocol. According to one memo, the network ordered the team to evacuate the final filming location immediately, even if it meant leaving thousands of dollars worth of equipment behind. When a TV crew is told to run without collecting gear, it means they saw something that shook even the decision-makers in offices far away from those woods. Insiders say the extraction itself was chaotic. Helicopters were dispatched to a location where the crew had no reason to be scheduled. Radios were blowing up with instructions, and field staff were told to pack only essentials. Several members later admitted they didn't even know why they were being evacuated. They just followed orders, because the tone in the voices coming through the radio didn't leave much room for debate. And beneath that panic, there was something unspoken. Fear, real fear. The kind that comes from people who had spent years tracking dangerous animals, navigating harsh wilderness, and dealing with unpredictable weather, yet suddenly felt outmatched by whatever had appeared in those woods.
But I'm not picking up a heat signature. Russ, come in. Russell, there is something moving in front of me. I mean, I can only describe it like a black silhouette walking past.
One technician who handled the audio equipment confessed that the atmosphere during extraction didn't feel like a production emergency. It felt like a containment emergency. Crew members were pale, shaken, and completely drained, refusing to answer questions about what they had seen or heard the night before. Some wouldn't even take their personal gear. The night everything changed. The distress radio calls. The moment everything collapsed didn't come with a roar or some dramatic confrontation. It came through a small radio late at night when most of the camp was winding down. According to the insiders who finally spoke out, the team had been on high alert for days. Equipment was failing, the forest felt wrong, and everyone sensed something circling just outside the reach of their lights. But no one expected what came through those encrypted radio channels. The first transmission was barely understandable, buried under static and broken breaths. But the fear in the voice cut straight through the noise. Someone from the scouting team was trying to stay calm, but you could hear the shaking. Then the words came through clearly, sharp enough to freeze anyone who heard them. It's moving around us. The channel went silent, then cracked open again. More static, more panic, and then the same voice repeated it, this time louder, almost desperate. It's moving around us. Those 5 words changed everything. The crew monitoring the radios knew these weren't rookies. These were seasoned experts. People who had spent their lives in the wilderness, people who didn't scare easily. For them to sound like that meant something was happening out there that no training could prepare them for. A second voice tried to cut in, but the transmission fractured into heavy static. Some insiders say you could hear movement in the background, fast, heavy, and too coordinated to be an animal stumbling through brush. Moments later, the signal dropped entirely. Not faded, not weakened, just gone. as if someone had ripped the connection out of existence. The crew back at base could only wait and hope the scout team made it back. When they finally did return just before dawn, they refused to talk about what they saw. Their faces were pale, and one of them reportedly kept repeating that they weren't alone out there, even after being told to rest. That was the moment production realized something had shifted from unusual to dangerous. Within 24 hours of that transmission, filming stopped completely. The network ordered an immediate shutdown of operations and pulled the crew out of the forest under emergency procedures. No more exploring, no more footage, no more questions. The message was clear. They had crossed a line. Whatever had surrounded the scouting team that night wasn't just legendary. It was real, it was intelligent, and it didn't want them there. And for the first time since the show began, the crew understood that they weren't the ones doing the observing anymore. They were the ones being watched. The team's mission before everything went wrong. Before everything spiraled out of control, Expedition Bigfoot wasn't treated like some wild treasure hunt or a desperate attempt to chase campfire stories. The whole point of the show was to take something wrapped in mystery and give it a proper scientific investigation. The team wasn't made of thrill seekers trying to go viral. They were specialists, scientists, survival experts, and researchers who wanted to answer a simple question using modern tools. If something was hiding in North America's deepest wilderness, could technology finally expose it? And for a while, that mission felt exciting, controlled, and full of potential. The equipment they brought into the forest wasn't random gear thrown together for TV. They used AI-driven heat sensors capable of tracking body temperatures through thick vegetation. They launched advanced drones equipped with thermal cameras that could scan entire ridgelines in minutes. Parabolic microphones were set up to capture distant vocal patterns, the kind most human ears would miss. And maybe the most groundbreaking tool they introduced was environmental DNA sampling, eDNA, where soil, water, and air particles were analyzed for genetic traces of unknown species. This was the type of tech used in real wildlife research, not entertainment gimmicks. Because of this scientific foundation, the show quickly stood out. It didn't rely on shaky phone footage or blurry shadows. Viewers started noticing how different it felt from the typical paranormal-style shows. There was no overacting, no dramatic music to force fear. It was calm, methodical, and shockingly convincing. You could watch it and actually feel like the team was getting closer to something that had managed to stay hidden for generations. As the seasons went on, the evidence started stacking up. Strange heat signatures, massive footprints, unknown vocal frequencies, even tiny biological clues picked up from eDNA. And every time the team shared their findings, more people tuned in. Ratings climbed because the story didn't feel like fantasy anymore. It felt like discovery in progress, the kind that could change a belief people have argued about for decades. The deeper the team went into remote locations, the more serious the mission became, both for them and for the audience watching. Before the final season, production insiders admitted the team was closer than ever. They were capturing patterns and movements that didn't match any known species. The data was becoming harder to ignore, harder to debunk, and harder for the network to brush off as speculation. Viewers could sense it too. The show had crossed from curiosity to something that felt real, as if the team was just a few steps away from undeniable proof. Technology starts failing in ways nobody can explain. The first real warning sign didn't come from a footprint or a strange sound. It came from the equipment. The same gear that had worked perfectly for years suddenly started failing the moment the team entered the final stretch of the expedition. Batteries that normally lasted hours would drain in seconds, sometimes dying the instant they were powered on. The tech crew kept swapping them out, thinking it was a bad batch, but the same thing happened again and again. It was as if something in the forest was pulling the life out of their devices, leaving them blind and unprepared in the middle of nowhere. Then the drones started dropping. These weren't cheap hobby drones. They were high-end machines built for rough terrain and long-range flights. Out of nowhere, they began crashing one by one. Some lost connection mid-air and spiraled into the trees. Others froze in place, hovering until their batteries died. One drone even shot upward unexpectedly before falling so hard the team couldn't recover its memory card. No one could understand it because there were no power lines, no storms, no geological anomalies, nothing that could explain this kind of interference. Communication didn't fare any better. Radios jammed for hours, turning every channel into a mix of static and faint distortion. The team tried switching frequencies, moving locations, and even using backup equipment, but nothing worked. At times, the radios went completely silent, as if the forest swallowed the signal whole. You can imagine the stress of being deep in the wilderness and suddenly being cut off from the rest of the team, especially when they were already dealing with strange sightings and unexplained sounds at night. But the strangest part was the wildlife. or rather, the lack of it. The forest around them went unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, no deer tracks or small animals rustling through the brush. Even the experienced trackers couldn't find signs of normal life. It felt like everything had moved out, leaving the crew alone in a place that was supposed to be full of movement. The few trail cameras that stayed working showed flashes of something massive moving between the trees. The shapes were too tall, too fast, and too controlled to match any known animal. The first physical evidence, the giant handprint. The moment the team found the handprint by the riverbank, everything changed. At first, it looked like a regular impression in the mud, the kind you'd expect after a storm or from a large animal passing through. But as they got closer, the size became impossible to ignore. The palm alone measured almost 14 inches across, and the depth of the print showed a weight far heavier than any human could leave. What really made everyone freeze wasn't just the size, it was the detail. You could actually see the skin texture pressed into the mud, faint ridges that looked disturbingly human, but stretched and wider, like something evolved for strength rather than precision. For a moment, there was excitement. After all, this was the kind of evidence researchers dream about. Maria and Russ crouched down, barely breathing as they studied the print, and someone quietly whispered that this was the most significant find of the entire expedition. But excitement only lasted a few seconds before something else settled in. Silence. Not the normal quiet of the woods. This was the kind of silence that makes your chest tighten. The birds stopped. The wind stopped. Even the water seemed to flow differently, as if the whole forest was holding its breath. The crew looked at one another, and it was clear none of them felt good anymore. Footprints can be explained away or misread, but a handprint like that, with clear finger shapes and lines in the skin, that wasn't the kind of thing anyone could rationalize. Ronnie, who usually joked through tense moments, didn't say a word. He just backed away slowly while keeping his eyes on the tree line. No one had to ask why. They all felt the same thing, that whatever made that print was close enough to leave it fresh, and close enough to be watching them right then. Back at camp, Bryce reviewed drone footage from earlier that morning. The thermal camera had caught something moving along the ridge, something upright and tall. The heat signature was unlike anything they had seen before. Narrow shoulders, long limbs, and a stride that covered ground faster than any human could manage. It moved with purpose, not wandering aimlessly like an animal avoiding danger. It felt aware, almost strategic. When the figure stepped behind a cluster of trees, it didn't reappear. It didn't run. It just vanished, as if it knew exactly where to go to stay out of sight. The experiment site, a discovery no one was prepared for. The crew thought they had already seen the worst the forest could throw at them, but nothing compared to the clearing Maria and Russ stumbled into one cold morning. They followed a foul smell drifting through the trees, a heavy mix of blood, earth, and something metallic. When they stepped into the open space, it was like walking into the aftermath of something that didn't belong to nature at all. The ground was torn apart, not chaotically, but with a disturbing kind of order. Bones were scattered across the clearing, not randomly, but arranged in deliberate patterns that made no sense from a typical predator's point of view. Maria kneeled beside what looked like the remains of a deer, and that's when the full horror of it settled in. The spine wasn't ripped or crushed the way wolves or bears leave it. It was cut cleanly, almost surgically. Several ribs had been snapped at perfect angles, as if measured. The marrow removed cleanly from the inside. This wasn't feeding. It wasn't survival instinct. This looked like something, or someone, was harvesting, collecting, studying. As more of the crew arrived, the shock spread across their faces. You could see their minds racing, trying to fit what they were seeing into anything normal or logical. But nothing matched. Predators tear, crush, drag, and devour. They don't drill holes, they don't neatly extract marrow, and they definitely don't arrange bones in clusters the way these were laid out. Almost symmetrical, spaced evenly apart, like someone documenting patterns or conducting experiments. The deeper they looked, the more wrong it felt. These weren't leftovers of a meal. They were artifacts of intention. Russ, who usually had answers for everything related to tracking, stood frozen at the edge of the clearing. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaking. He pointed out massive impressions in the soil near the bones, knuckle-like prints spaced evenly, as if something very large had moved across the ground on all fours while working. It wasn't clumsy or wild. It was controlled, methodical, every step left with a sense of power and purpose. That was the moment morale broke. You could feel the shift in everyone. Whatever they were dealing with here didn't just exist. It observed, it learned, it experimented, and it understood its environment in a way that felt dangerously close to human intelligence. The crew realized they weren't tracking a creature that occasionally passed through the woods. They were standing in the middle of someone's workspace, someone who had noticed their presence long before they ever stepped foot in that clearing. The structures in the woods, evidence of intelligence. The further the team pushed into the valley, the clearer it became that they weren't dealing with random wilderness behavior. The real turning point came when Mireya spotted what she first thought was a collapsed shelter near a frozen creek. But as the team approached, they realized it wasn't collapsed at all. It was built. The logs were arranged in a perfect triangular shape, reinforced with moss and stone, almost like someone had assembled it with purpose. Inside the structure were bones sorted by size, along with river stones carved with long, parallel grooves that looked too straight to be natural. It didn't feel like the work of an animal. It felt deliberate. Something living in these woods wasn't just hiding. It was building, marking, and maintaining territory. And it clearly didn't appreciate trespassers. They documented what they could, taking photos and samples, and then left the site before sunset. But when they returned the next morning, everything changed. The structure they had spent hours studying was destroyed completely. Logs snapped in half, stones scattered, bones crushed into splinters. The claw-marked trees were smeared with fresh sap, as if something had run its hands across them only moments before dawn. Deep footprints circled the clearing, matching the size and stride of the prints they had seen near the kill site. The entire scene looked like a warning. For the first time, the team felt like they had crossed a boundary. The destruction wasn't random or messy. It felt retaliatory, almost like the response of something that realized its property had been touched. Ronnie whispered that it felt like a territorial strike, and no one disagreed. The forest was no longer just a location. It was behaving like an active participant, watching every move the crew made. The moment the team realized they weren't just being watched, but communicated with, came quietly, almost hidden inside hours of static. Bryce had been reviewing audio files late one night, listening through the routine wind and distant creaks of trees, when something unusual surfaced. At first, it sounded like a low hum buried under the noise, but as he filtered the frequencies, the sound grew sharper. What came through next stopped him cold. It wasn't random. It wasn't an animal stumbling through brush or a distant echo. It had rhythm. It had pattern. It rose and fell like speech. He replayed it, heart pounding, and the same sequence repeated. 3 deep tones, followed by a pause, then 3 more. When he called the rest of the team into the tent, everyone leaned in, confused but captivated. On the 3rd replay, the word-like sound finally cut through clearly. Kumba. None of them recognized it. It didn't match any known animal vocalization. It didn't fit any regional language. It didn't even sound human. But it had intention, like someone calling out to someone else. Mireya sent the clip to linguist Dr. Ronald Casper, a specialist in unusual vocal patterns. His response came back almost immediately, and it wasn't comforting. He said the structure of the sounds showed repetition, tonal shifts, and response patterns, traits associated with language, not instinctive noise. He pointed out that the deeper voice always initiated the phrase, and the others followed with slight variations, like a conversation between multiple individuals. The team didn't know what to do with that. If something out there had language, it meant intelligence. If it had intelligence, then everything they were experiencing had a purpose. Over the next few nights, more recordings captured overlapping voices, some close, some distant, moving through the trees like a coordinated group. Each time the word Kumba surfaced, sometimes loud, sometimes faint, but always present. Russ suggested it could be a name or a call signal. Ronnie thought it meant they were being identified. The uncertainty made it worse. You can rationalize an animal. You can't rationalize a voice calling out in the dark. Then came the night no one forgot. Around 3 a.m., just when the forest reached its heaviest, most unnatural silence, a single knock echoed from somewhere beyond the camp. The microphones picked it up instantly. A second later, a deep voice, raw, powerful, and unmistakably deliberate, shouted that same word, Kumba! It wasn't distant this time. It was close enough that several crew members rushed out of their tents, lights shaking in their hands, scanning the tree line in panic. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.